Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. We've recently launched our Patreon page, which can be found at cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon. If you aren't familiar with Patreon, it's an easy way for those who are interested in this show to help out by simply pledging a small amount each month in sponsorship. Now that could be as little as $5 a month, which is about £3.80, or as much as you like. You will enable us to dedicate more time creating more content to help you, including videos, more blog posts, and even more shows. So if you can, head over to cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon and get involved. In this episode, we discuss the new cross-platform IDE, Ryder, from JetBrains with Matt Ellis. Matt is a developer/developer advocate at JetBrains. He has spent over 20 years shipping software in various industries and currently works with IDEs and development tools, having fun with abstract syntax trees and source code analysis. He's worked on several open source projects with a heavy leaning towards plugins for JetBrains tools for something useful, like adding XUnit test runner support to Resharper, to something less useful, such as Clippy for Resharper. Yes, unfortunately, he really did do that. His current favourite side project is the Unity support in Ryder. So welcome to the Cynical Developer, Matt.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for taking time out to come and talk to us about this new IDE, or newish IDE.
Yep, newish. It's been out for nearly a year now.
It doesn't seem that long. Time flies very, very quickly.
I think we're clearly getting old. Time speeds up as the older you get, so yeah, I'm feeling that.
Yeah. Best not talk too much about that, especially after the day I've had today. Anyway, so Indeed. Developer advocate, what's one of those?
That's a very good question. I don't really know. I've only been doing it for about 6 years, and I still haven't got a good pat answer for this. Developer advocate, the main role really is to be able to talk to other developers. So I am a developer by trade. I've been doing it for far too many years. And the idea is that I can then go out and speak to other developers about the products and the tooling that JetBrains have, and have sort of proper, sensible questions. So I can demo the products properly because I know how to use them, and I use them day to day myself. And then I can answer genuine questions from people as well. So, the people who I want to talk to and show the JetBrains tooling to, they are other developers. And so I can then basically have a proper conversation with them. Sure. So
you're actually dog fooding the IDE yep. and all the other stuff like Resharper and dot cover and all that sort of stuff.
That's right. Yes. So all of the developer advocates in JetBrains, we're all developers by trade. We all still build things. We all still deliver and work on projects. And we dog food all the tools. So that'll be everything from the IDEs for .NET and everything, but also like the Java IDEs and WebStorm and everything else there as well.
Sure. Yeah, and over the years, I know the JetBrains library of products has grown considerably. And I've been a long-term supporter of Ryder and of Resharper, and I brought that into many companies over the years. Probably nearly every single one I've worked at. Very, very much a bit of a Resharper fanboy.
Excellent. Well, I'm very pleased to hear it. To be fair, I'm the same actually. I was using Resharper before I joined the company. I was using it for a good few years. And in fact, one of my first open source projects was the XUnit test runner for Resharper, and then that got me actually involved in JetBrains itself.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. I like the XUnit test runner as well, because I like XUnit, and obviously the built-in version of test runner that's in Visual Studio doesn't support at this time, at the time of recording, XUnit. So it's a nice little addition.
There we go. But I'm a big fan of XUnit as well. I like the way it works. I like the opinions it has. For writing tests over something like NUnit, for example.
Yeah, it's a slightly bit more opinionated, probably a little better implementation, whereas NUnit, I think, is a direct port of JUnit, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it shows in some places. XUnit sort of it works nicely. It's a good tool to use.
Yeah. Anyway, we're not here to talk about XUnit, NUnit, GUnit, or anything like that, or Resharper. We're here to talk about Ryder. Now, we mentioned that Ryder is an IDE, and it's cross-platform, but can you go into a little bit more detail about what Ryder is?
Yeah, sure. So it is a product that we started selling roughly about a year ago. It's been in development for a little while before that, and so it's an IDE. It's an integrated development environment for writing code, for writing C# and .NET code specifically. And it is cross-platform, so it works on Windows, Mac, and Linux, and it's the same experience across all of those platforms as well. So it's not like different versions or rebadge things on different platforms. It's exactly the same across everything, and it is the idea is to give you a great environment for writing and producing code. So you can work on your .NET projects, your .NET Core projects, your Mono, Unity, Xamarin projects, all within the same environment, or cross-platform if you want to be. And so we provide all the tooling that you kind of want to use there. So editing, sort of lots of code completion and things as well. Stuff like very rich navigation, allow you to get around your code really quickly. Inspections is a big thing, so we can look at your code, do source code analysis, and try and find out what can be potential errors in your code, and flag those up early, and then help you quickly rewrite those blocks of code as well to fix those issues. Refactorings and all sorts of good stuff going on there as well. But because it's an IDE, the big thing there is the I bit, the integrated bit, and so it gives you a load of stuff out of the box then just to be good at writing your code and delivering your project. So things like what have we got? So things like version control. Obviously, that's kind of integrated into the product there, and that supports things like Subversion, Mercurial, Git, Team Foundation services. All of the sort of source control providers that you'd expect. And you can sort of integrate with GitHub and all those kinds of things. There's database support, and there's a whole bunch of other useful things like NuGet packages and all good stuff really. So yeah, it is basically your one-stop shop for writing .NET code.
Right. Okay. Cool. So it sounds like it's more of a full package. It's not a competitor for the likes of Visual Studio Code or Sublime or Notepad++ or anything like that. It's probably more of a competitor to Visual Studio. But we've already got some of the tools from JetBrains in Visual Studio. Why do we need Ryder? What sets it apart from the likes of Visual Studio?
Yeah, sure. So you're right there. So it is more. It provides more functionality and more features than something like Visual Studio Code or Sublime or any of those things. Those are editors. They can be very rich editors and provide a lot of good functionality. But Ryder can then give you a whole lot more, basically. And Ryder can give you a whole lot more stuff than Visual Studio itself can. So Visual Studio is getting more and more capable as time goes on, but Ryder it already delivers a whole lot more. So one of the key things about Ryder is that it is built on top of two other JetBrains products. So we've taken the C# product Resharper, which of course is a plugin to Visual Studio to sort of give it better code completion and navigation and refactorings and all these other things. And we've put that inside, we've integrated it with IntelliJ, which is our Java-based IDE, which is we've had around for about 17 years. We've been building that, and IntelliJ is also the platform to various other IDEs we have as well, such as WebStorm for web tooling, DataGrip for databases, PyCharm, Python, Goland, which is a new one now for working in Go, and a whole suite of other IDEs we've got there. So there's a lot of tooling we've got in this IntelliJ platform, which we're then sort of coupling up with Resharper, which itself has been around for about 14 years, I think. And it can deliver a ton of functionality. So even though Ryder is only less than a year old, it can deliver an absolute ton of functionality for you, and way more than actually Visual Studio already has. So if you are familiar with Resharper already, you're going to get pretty much all of the functionality of Resharper inside Ryder. There's a few things we still don't do. For example, we don't yet have the integration with the code coverage and the profiling tools, but a whole load of the other features in Resharper are already there. So we've got thousands of inspections and quick fixes, and we've got sort of several hundred quick fixes and context actions so that we can sort of quickly rewrite your code where there are inspections. And then we've got like about 50 plus refactorings, whereas Visual Studio, on the other hand, has significantly less. So if we want to just look at the numbers there, the Visual Studio has I think it's about 10 refactorings, and then there are significantly less than inspections and quick fixes that are available there. So if we want to sort of compare the two products there, then we've got a much bigger base to build on and a much bigger sort of feature set to call on. But on top of that, there's a sort of other benefits of using Ryder instead of Visual Studio as well. So one of them, the cross-platform is a big win for us. So we are seeing this as a very useful thing for working with code like .NET Core. So for example, if .NET Core now, your code can go cross-platform, well, now your IDE can go cross-platform too, and you get a very rich, full feature set on all the different platforms you want to use it on. And that's not just necessarily for .NET Core as well, so that helps with Xamarin as well. So the Xamarin tooling we've got in Ryder, and also Unity, which is sort of like my little pet project, which is very popular and which Ryder is delivering a great experience for. He's slightly biased, but this is what we're being told. We're getting great feedback from the Unity community, and that's working on cross platforms. A lot of people want to use that on the Mac, for example. Unity is quite big on the Mac, and so now we can deliver a really good product on the Mac.
Sure. So I guess because it's the same idea across all of them, unlike Xamarin Studio, which is now Visual Studio for Mac, and Visual Studio 2017 on Windows, is that they're similar, but there are big differences as well. One with Ryder, when you're on the different platforms, it's the same product, and I guess the shortcut keys that you know and love are more or less the same, apart from the nuances, I guess, between the control and the command key on Mac.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've tried to make it a very familiar experience for when people sort of coming away from Visual Studio and using Ryder. So we offer sort of several different key maps. We've got far too many probably. So we can, if you are familiar with Visual Studio with or without Resharper, we've got a key map which will work with that. And if you are familiar coming from the other direction, if you're coming from, say, IntelliJ, then or one of the IntelliJ-based products such as WebStorm, then we've got key maps which can work with that as well. So we can be very, very flexible, and everything's configurable, of course. But then you can give you a very familiar environment to work in.
The learning curve then for someone who maybe wants to give Ryder a go, or actually just go hell for leather, to put it in a nice term, and go, right, I'm just going to use Ryder and see where it leads me. The learning curve on that is massively reduced, I guess. It's not like jumping into something like Eclipse from the lovely safe world of Visual Studio, where all of a sudden you're in Eclipse and it's very scary and daunting.
I can't say I haven't actually used Eclipse, at least not for many, many years, and university, which is... Anyway, we won't talk about that.
Yeah, that's probably the last time I used it as well, to be honest.
This is a long time ago. So I can't comment on Eclipse, but yes, the idea is to give you a very familiar environment to work in, and the learning curve. Obviously, there are differences. There are different ways of working there. So, for example, the docking toolbars on the side, they've got slightly different ways of working than they do in Visual Studio. But on the whole, it should be a very familiar environment for you. There's a lot of overlap with the key maps. There's going to be a couple of differences where features are implemented slightly different because of the IntelliJ codebase. So something like version control, for example, that'll have a different set of keyboard shortcuts to what you'd be familiar in Visual Studio, because Visual Studio provides the source control for Visual Studio, whereas IntelliJ and the IntelliJ platform provides it for Ryder. So it's a slightly different experience and slightly different keyboard shortcuts for that. But the core experience should be very familiar. And I actually kind of give there's two keyboard shortcuts that you should learn. And once you've got this, then you've kind of got entry into all of the functionality for the rest of the product. And the first one is Shift. So just hit the Shift key twice. And this is Ryder's search everywhere. And this will give you a little pop-up box, and you just start typing, and we will go off and we'll very, very quickly search for pretty much everything. So we'll search for classes, file names, type members such as methods or properties, recently used files, and lots of information there. So we can very, very quickly navigate around your code that way. So that's a very good one to use, Shift.
Okay, yeah, I'll make a note of that one. I think
Yep.
that's. Can you also get to that with Control Shift and F? Is that the same function? Do you
The
know?
Control Shift and Left is that's actually like a find in files. So
Right.
so the search everywhere is trying to find a symbol, try and find something
Okay.
sort of meaningful and sort of semantic in a way, something which want to search for. Whereas the Control Shift and F is the plain text search.
Right. Okay.
So we build a very fast index of all of your files there,
Yep.
and we can do a very, very quick text file based search. But we find that mostly that's for like trying to find a string or something, so like looking up a string literal in your code. Whereas the shift is when you want to go somewhere. So if you want to go and find a class, for example, you hit shift,
Right.
and then you just start typing, you get to your class. And the nice thing about that is it works with shortcuts as well. So we work with the idea of camel humps. So like if you take the capital letter of each word of your class name.
Yep.
So if your class name was input manager, you could just type IM, and we'd try and match things that match IM, and we pull up things like input manager.
Yep.
And that works surprisingly well, even given a very large project. So if you've got a really massive solution with lots of things in there, then it's surprising how quickly you can get to a particular class based on just the capital letters of those words. It sort of reduces it down very, very quickly. And so it's a very quick way of navigating around your code base.
Sure. I think some of the you said there were slight nuances. I think the one that catches me out when I've been using Ryder is the commenting out and uncommenting out of lines. I think in Visual Studio it's Control K then C, and that will comment it out, and then it's Control K and U to uncomment it, where it's Control K and C to comment and uncomment in Ryder. That catches me out. Every time I use it, I'm like, it's not working. Why is it not working? Why can't it uncomment it?
Yeah. So I think I think that might be one of those overlaps where you're using some Visual Studio functionality and some Resharper functionality, because the Resharper functionality is really just a toggle. So it's like comment this line or uncomment this line, depending on what it's got selected. Sure. So there will be sort of nuances like that. But the other keyboard shortcut I want to tell you, though, is the other sort of really important one to learn is Alt-Enter, which is going to be very familiar to you if you've used Resharper or if you've used any of the other sort of IntelliJ tools. That's the keyboard shortcut that does stuff. So one of the things that Resharper and Ryder does, bearing in mind, of course, that Ryder is running the Resharper engine, is it'll inspect your code and it'll try and find issues. And it'll find things like possible null reference exceptions, or it'll find something like where a collection is being iterated when nobody's populated it first, or it'll even do sort of suggestions on new language features. So use the null coalescing operator here, and it'll highlight those. It'll give you the little squigglies in the code. We should all be familiar with that kind of an idea by now. And then the keyboard shortcut to use for that is Alt-Enter. Once you've got the text cursor on that, hit Alt-Enter, we get a little pop-up menu, and that'll give you the options which you can do there, just as you'd expect there, to sort of quickly fix up your code and rewrite the code. But we can take it a little bit further, because in Ryder, we show the entry points to the other functionality. So wherever you are, you can hit Alt-Enter, and you will get the keyboard. There will be menu items there for navigate to, refactor this, generate code, and inspect this. And with those 4 items, you can basically do everything.
Okay.
So cool. If you've got the text cursor on the name of a class, for example, you can hit Alt-Enter and do some random things which are, well, not random, but you can do some sort of contextual things which are applicable in there, such as converting the class from public to private or some such. Yeah. But you can also then go to the refactor this menu, and that'll bring up the refactor menu. And if you can't even remember that, you can actually just do Alt-Enter and start typing, say, rename. And that will then do a search in the Alt-Enter menu, and it'll find the rename action for you and allow that, and then invoke that on the class itself.
Well, that's really good. That's really good. I didn't realize it was so powerful.
Yep. So it acts as a sort of like a find action, basically. Yep. So Shift allows you to search your entire code and go and find bits of your code, and then Alt-Enter is find out, do actions, and then find actions as well.
Yeah. I think you mentioned that the do random function. I think that could be quite a dangerous feature, that one, if you implemented
surprisingly
that.
enough, in Resharper there is a command which you can bind to a keyboard shortcut, which is Alt-Enter I'm feeling lucky, which will always run the very first item on the Alt-Enter menu list.
Nice.
So one of our developers added that in for fun.
Yeah.
But there's never been a keyboard shortcut assigned to it. If you're feeling adventurous, then go for it. If
Yeah,
you're feeling lucky,
give it a try.
knock yourselves out.
Cool. So I think we mentioned there that that Ryder supports C#. Does it provide any other support for any other .NET languages?
Yeah, sure. So it's C# is kind of like the primary support and the one with the most support. But we've also got support for Visual Basic and F# support as well, which is nice. So the Visual Basic support comes from what Resharper already provides. So there's a good base of information there. The level of support for the languages kind of follows demand, basically. C# is by far the most popular language, and it gets the majority of the features. Then we've got Visual Basic, which has a good chunk of functionality, and then F#, which is a fairly recent addition for us. So we don't provide anything for F# in Resharper in Visual Studio, but we do have it in Ryder.
Right. Okay.
And the way this works is quite interesting because it's based on the architecture of Ryder itself, which is, you could almost say it's microservices. So Ryder is an IntelliJ front end, so it's a JVM application running to give us the user interface. But all of the smarts and the analysis for C# comes from running Resharper out of process. So we run Resharper as a headless process, and we can sort of communicate between the two. This allows us to do lots of fun things as well. So, for example, we can run in 64-bit, so we can sort of make better use of, more use of extra memory and stuff, and use more memory before we hit garbage collection and things. But because we're allowed to run sort of things out of process, we can do that with other things as well. And so we can run F# out of process as well. And so we can use the F# compiler services to provide us with a lot of F# functionality. And over time now we're sort of integrating that more into the Resharper code model as well. So allow us to do some very interesting things. So right now we can do cross-language references. So I can go from my F# code to the C# code that's using it, and vice versa. So I can do sort of cross-project references.
Right.
Which is good. And we're sort of working on expanding that and having cross-project refactorings as well. So we're looking to sort of bring things like rename symbol, and it'll rename your F# code and then rename the same code, the same symbols in C# where you're using it in a C# project.
Oh, right. Okay. Sure. That's cool, and I didn't realise that it supported F# as well. So it's something on my hit list to go and have a look at, but I've not got round to doing it just yet.
Yep.
So there's an excuse to go and have a play with that with Ryder as well.
Absolutely.
And we touched on in your introduction as well that you built an XUnit .NET test runner. So it obviously supports XUnit. What other testing frameworks can I use in Ryder?
Pretty much everything there is going, really. I'm probably going to regret saying that. So let me think. So we've got we've got NUnit support, obviously, XUnit support. Both of those are in the box now. So the XUnit support was a plugin for a good while, but over recent years it's gained a lot of popularity. So the .NET Core project, for example, they use XUnit as their default runner. Yes. So that's now sort of just part of the product itself that's rolled straight into Resharper, straight into Ryder. It's in the box, and there we go. So NUnit, XUnit, and MS Test are all supported there. And I think there's two different versions of MS Test. We support both of them. Although, if I remember rightly, it's only MS Test V2, which is supported cross-platform. There are licensing restrictions or tooling restrictions which prevent version 1 running anywhere other than Windows.
Sure. So with those different languages support, with the test framework support and that, then Ryder is, I guess, usable for production code as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we were working on Ryder for a while before release, and we released about a year ago, and absolutely since release it has been ready for production. We've been using it internally for longer than that, and we use it day to day. to build Ryder itself, but also some of the Resharper team will use Ryder as well. So some of the Resharper team use Ryder, some use Resharper, so we get kind of a good dog fooding of both platforms. And also it's key. I keep mentioning Resharper because Resharper is the brains behind Ryder. So anything that happens in Resharper gets sort of feeds back into Ryder. So they boost each other basically. Any changes we make to Resharper benefit Ryder. Any changes we make to Ryder benefit Resharper. So it's a good thing. Yeah. And yes, it's absolutely ready for production and has been for about a year really.
Yeah, that's good because as you say, Ryder's quite a young product in comparison to the likes of Visual Studio, and I think that can be quite a scary situation for some developers and especially for some companies that they don't want to go and put all their eggs into another camp to completely mix cliches there.
Yeah, just chuck them in. It's fine.
Yeah.
But it's got a good pedigree though. Ryder has. It is based on Resharper, which has been around for well over 10 years, and IntelliJ as well, which has been around for even longer. So it's kind of merging two really good platforms there, really.
Sure. So in Visual Studio, when I'm using Resharper, I can check my code coverage and other metrics around that. Can I do that in Ryder as well?
Not yet.
Right.
Not yet. So at the time of recording, not yet. We are working on bringing .cover, which is JetBrains code coverage tool, into Ryder. And I think that's going to make it into the 2018.2 timeframe. So depending on when this goes out, it might already be available. But we... Why are you laughing? When's this going to come out?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things with time shifting with podcasts. Yep. There could be somebody listening to this maybe a year or two after we've recorded, and it's always one of those hard things for podcasts to get quite right. And you always have to say, and I do it quite regular at the time of recording. This is the situation.
Yes. Absolutely. So at the time of recording, and with this particular version number, so it's good. But yes, so. We should be getting code coverage into Ryder 2018.2. The tooling works on Resharper, obviously, and in Visual Studio. And what happens there is basically you can run your tests with code coverage. We'll calculate that code coverage, and we can display it then in line on the text editor. And the experience should hopefully be the same in Ryder as well. But with the benefit there of running cross-platform. That's one of the reasons why it hasn't happened so far, is because we are trying to make these tools, the code coverage and the profiling tools, work cross-platform. And there's lots of challenges there with the fact that you've got the .NET Framework, you've got Mono, and you've got .NET Core.
Sure.
And trying to make everything work across all of those is a fun challenge.
Yeah, it's not exactly a small ask, is it?
Not at all.
So other features within Ryder that people will probably want to know about would be package management, so the likes of NuGet and NPM and stuff like that. Which of these technologies are supported by Ryder?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have NuGet support in there. Absolutely, yeah. So we've got a NuGet tool window, which is very different to the way that Visual Studio works with the NuGet packages. So this is one of those interesting areas where previously with Resharper, we haven't had any need to do anything with NuGet specifically because Visual Studio provides all that tooling. Whereas now in Ryder, we need to provide our own tooling. And so we can do things a little bit more interesting. So we do a lot of heavy caching going on there. So we will cache the results of searches, and we can cache then sort of the package values that you've had back, the descriptions and all the metadata and all that kind of stuff. So we can be incredibly quick at finding the packages that you've previously searched for. So if you wanted to search for XUnit or NUnit or AutoMapper or whatever, if you've searched for those before, the results come back almost instantly because they're fed from the cache, and then we'll sort of asynchronously update those in the background. So we can bring you back the results of the package, and then as those results are being displayed, we can then be pulling in the latest versions or the details of the latest versions of those packages. And then obviously, of course, we can install and uninstall those packages in the various projects, how you want them to work.
Sure.
With package managers as well, like NPM, the way Ryder works with front-end technologies is that we've brought in a lot of the functionality from WebStorm. So WebStorm is an IDE which is all about front-end front-end coding and front-end technologies. So things like, your HTML, your CSS, your JavaScript, your Node.js, your NPM, your Gulp, your Grunt, and all that kind of stuff. All of that, more or less, is brought into Ryder. And so you've got a ton of functionality for front-end development in there as well. So you can do things like open a folder full of web of a web project. Just open it as a folder and work with it as you would do in WebStorm.
Sure. Okay, cool. We also touched on the fact that you built plugins for JetBrains, all their different tools and that, and we said that you'd done Clippy for Resharper and the XUnit run,
yes,
.NET test runner. So I guess that you can actually write extensions yourself for Ryder as well.
You can, yeah. So it's we have to admit it's not terribly easy. There's a bit of a learning curve for doing Ryder extensions in particular. But yes, it is extensible. So the Unity support, which I work on, is actually written as a plugin. We actually bundle it in the box as it happens, but it is basically a plugin, and it works in just the same way.
Okay.
And incidentally, it's available as a plugin for Resharper. So this is kind of where we show that Ryder and Resharper, under the covers, they're very much the same thing, because the plugin for Unity support in Ryder, most of that functionality is also available in Resharper as a plugin.
Okay.
But yes, you can write some plugins, and the API. We don't necessarily have a plugin API as such. We just have the API that we use, which is good because you get the full power and the full breadth of the API. The downside to that is that sometimes we'll need to change it to work with the product and to evolve the product. And so that it can sort of push a bit of a maintenance cost onto a plugin user, a plugin author.
Yeah. So because Ryder is written in the JVM, do the extensions have to be written in Java, or could you write extensions in C# or VB.NET or F#, I guess, because that's supported now as well?
Yeah, you can write plugins basically in C#. So most of the plugins are .NET code. So we will have, again, because we're running the engine, the C# engine behind Ryder is Resharper running out of process. That is a .NET process. It runs on the .NET framework on Windows. It runs on Mono right now on Mac and Linux. And so any plugin you do write would be a .NET assembly, and it would just get loaded by that. And there's a lot of things you can do in that plugin without having to touch any JVM code. Basically, anything that does not need a user interface, you can do in there. So things like inspections, quick fixes, and those kinds of things can be implemented purely as a .NET based plugin. If you want to have some user interface or some things which live in the user interface, in the IntelliJ user interface, those then have to be written in a JVM-based language, such as Java or Kotlin.
Right. Okay. Cool. So in Visual Studio, we can build our own templates for maybe in-house. We have a base template for all our projects, the way that they work. Can we do that with Ryder as well? Does it have support for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the new project template that we have, the new solution, new project template, is actually based on .NET New.
Right.
And the templates which you can get from .NET New, which is it's really rather cool. So the existing templates that are available for various .NET Core projects which use .NET New templates can then just be added into the new project dialog in Ryder. And there's a nice, easy way of doing that. You just sort of point to a file, you open the file and hit reload, and it's just added to the list. And there we go.
Nice.
Yeah, cool.
Is there like a marketplace where people can go and they can get these extensions that have already been made and the templates and stuff like that?
The templates you just have to kind of find them from .NET New, from projects which support .NET New. As far as I'm aware, there isn't a sort of marketplace for that kind of thing there. I don't know if Microsoft already has a website which does that. I've previously found them on the appropriate projects homepages and things. There is a plugin gallery that we have. We do support a plugin gallery, which you can then have. You can upload plugins and download those and install those into your copy of Ryder. And those plugins, again, one of the nice things about running on the IntelliJ platform is that we can use plugins for other IntelliJ products and bring those in. So if you are old like me and you're a big fan of Vim, for example, as your text editor, then there is a Vim plugin for IntelliJ tools, which works across the board, basically. It works in IntelliJ IDEA for Java and WebStorm, and also Ryder. So I use that. I have IDEA Vim is called, installed in Ryder. And we can do that. We can host Ryder-specific plugins there, or we can host these sort of compatible plugins there as well.
Okay, that's good. Now, I guess the last burning question is going to be: is there a fee for Ryder?
Yes, Ryder is a commercial product. So the way we actually work as a subscription license. So you can pay monthly if you want to. You can pay yearly. What we tend to do is have a yearly subscription, and you pay for 12 months, and then after 12 months, then there's actually a price reduction. So we give you a bit of a reduction then for sort of sticking with us for a year, and in fact we give you another price reduction then if you stick with us for 2 years. So the price then sort of varies depending on region, for example, and also it varies if you are an individual or if you are a business as well. So if you want a business license, basically if the company is paying for it, you want a business license. If you are paying it for yourself out of your own pocket, then you can use an individual license. But then our license does actually allow you to use that in work as well. So that's quite cool.
Oh, right,
but
okay.
we've got a couple of other useful things as well. So if you've got a decent sized popular open source project, we can give you free licenses for that. If you are a Microsoft MVP, you can get free licenses for that. If you're a student, you can get free licenses as well. If you are just graduated, you get a discount. If you are, what else is there? If you are teaching, if you're a sort of a classroom location, you can get free licenses as well. So there's a lot of ways of getting cheap licenses as well.
Yeah. So there is a fee, but there are also lots of free versions of it. If you happen to be in one of those little niches, then you can get it there. That's good. If the listeners want to go and find out a little bit more about Ryder, where should they go and actually find out about it? What websites can they look at?
JetBrains.com/Ryder, nice and easy. That will give you like an overview of the product. It'll give you like a feature list. It can give you details such as documentation. So we've got a lot of web help and documentation and descriptions of what's going on in there. We've got some sort of tutorial type stuff in there as well. And there's also then, of course, the details for buying. So all the prices are available on the website. We've got the business licenses, the individual licenses, the complimentary and discounted licenses. And I should also point out as well, we do an all products pack as well. So if you've got a couple of JetBrains tools, then it's actually worth you looking at this all products pack, because then that's just like one price and you get access to all of our IDEs. So if you use WebStorm for front-end development, if you use DataGrip for databases, or Goland for Go, and Ryder and all of these, if you kind of use a number of these things, then the all products pack is actually a great deal for getting access to everything, basically.
Yeah, sure. Cool. So people should go and definitely check that out.
Absolutely, yes. And there's a 30-day trial version as well, so you can give it a go, give it a whirl, see how it works out for you.
Yeah, fantastic. So something that we've mentioned, we've alluded to a couple of times, and I've got to ask you about it. Is Clippy for Resharper?
My finest hour.
Yeah, does it show up and go, hey, it looks like you're making an API? Let me screw that up for you.
No, it's actually very helpful. It's very good. Right. Sadly, it's a little bit out of date. I haven't updated it in a couple of years, but it started life as an April Fool's joke. But the best kind of April Fool's jokes are the ones that actually work and do something. So I always like the idea of Google announcing Gmail on April the 1st, and it's like, here you are, look, free email hosting with a gig of space, and everyone like, no, it's a joke. And they said, no, it's true, it's real. And so, yes, I did an April Fool's gag of Clippy for Resharper with, the whole picture there of, it looks like you're trying to refactor. Can I help?
Yep.
And people laughed and said, that's great and everything. So I'm like, no, it's real. You can download this. It's a plugin to Resharper, and it basically takes over the Alt-Enter menu. And so when you hit Alt-Enter, Clippy pops up, and all the items that would normally be in the Alt-Enter menu are in the sort of Clippy speech bubble. And it just works.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, and it'll pop up to sort of say, you're running tests, well done, 3 succeeded and 4 failed or something.
Yeah, I think I do remember actually seeing the April Fools for it, and I didn't actually ever realise that it had become a fully fledged plugin as well.
Yeah, I had to edit the post. There was a blog post there, and I had to edit the blog post a couple of times to actually show it in action and say, no, really, go and download it. That's the punchline. The funny bit is that it works. But I do know one guy who actually used it for about a month after, which was way more than intended. That's going above and beyond, I think.
Well, there's always that guy, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
So before we do wrap up, what is coming next for Ryder? What's some of the big features to look out for? And of course, like we said before, in podcast land, it could be that these features are already out, but as it is, what's coming up next?
So as of the time of recording, we have just started the 2018.2 early access program, the EAP program, which has got some new features in it, but it's all still we haven't really kind of merged a lot of stuff yet. So there are some nice new things in there. So things like integrated spell checker, so we can do spell checking of your variable names and your comments and string literals and things. So we'll warn you when you've got typos and things in there and quickly help you fix those, which is surprisingly useful. There are updates then to things like the unit testing itself. So there's some speed ups in how it works with .NET Core type projects, the SDK based projects, and some better keyboard shortcuts around that. There's some nice changes in the debugger as well. So we're doing something whereby we can we're kind of tidying up the call stack itself. So the call stack, instead of showing you all of the method names in sort of CLR type speak, we're actually kind of translating those into something which is a bit more human readable. So, for example, when you hit a constructor, instead of it just saying CTOR or whatever it does, it now just says new and then type. And we translate the generics from the way the CLR writes them into how you'd expect to see them in C#. And then also, even better with that one, though, is things like async methods. So where you would normally see, if you've got a breakpoint in your async method, where you'd normally see move next across the top there, we'll translate that and put that back to saying you're in this async method. So it gives you better context of where you are.
Sure. That'd be good.
Yeah, and there's a couple of other nice things in the debugger as well. So there's a memory view, which we just added in the last release, actually, and that's getting some updates as well. So when you're at a breakpoint, you can see all the objects that are in memory. You get to keep a track of how many objects have been allocated and deleted since the last breakpoint, and you can even sort of inspect all of them from that as well. So there's quite a lot of things coming, but there's a whole bunch more stuff which we've got in the works as well. So we're not done yet. Hopefully we're going to get code coverage in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be another ridiculously big release. So you were asking me earlier, one of the roles of the developer advocate, one of them is writing the blog posts for the release notes, and those are big posts.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the spell checking one will be so useful, because I could have done with that this week. I had an issue where I wrote a new endpoint, passed it over to the front end developers. For some reason, he couldn't get it working on his machine. I sent him the URL and said, "Look, it works." He's like, "I don't understand why it's not working on my code." And I'd actually spelt additional wrong. So when he typed it correctly, his didn't work.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a feature that will help me out.
Yeah, it's surprisingly useful and surprisingly helpful to have around.
Yeah, definitely. So we're out of time for this evening, for this episode, unfortunately. But I'd just like to say thank you for coming on and taking the time to actually talk to us about Ryder today.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been good. And hopefully it's spurred on some of the listeners out there to go and have a look at Ryder. I'm definitely going to go and give it a more in-depth look, I think. And so thank you to everybody out there in Listenerland for listening to The Cynical Developer. I'm James Sludar, and you've been listening to Matt Ellis talking about JetBrains Ryder. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website, where you can find all the resource links, show notes for each episode. And if you enjoy this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is, and help The Cynical Developer to reach more developers around the globe.